right. All right. So, on to my actual chapel topic for today. My topic probably doesn't surprise anyone, but how I chose it might. I wanted to start the year off with something that makes me really happy, like this kind of happy. Note, that's not me. That's just the best representation of how I could find of how the internet and the power of the information of technology around it makes me feel. So a little background on me first. I didn't touch my first computer until 8th grade, and even then it was almost exclusively for video games. They were kind of seen by most of the adults around me as a fad that would go away, but knowledge and learning have always been a passion of mine. If you were into learning on your own at that time, the process went something like this. I asked my mom if I can go to the library and get some books out. She would find a way to work the library visit into whatever errand she was running, and would normally get me to the library within a couple of days. I would go through this thing called the card catalog, looking for whatever subject I wanted to learn about at the time. I would pick out a few books that looked promising, and we would go home. If I was lucky, one of them turned out to be worth reading. If not, well, start the process over again. Special kudos to my mother on that one for her tireless encouragement of any field of learning. How she got me to like a card catalog, I have no idea. So for the people that really know me, my real fascination has always been the human mind. It may surprise you to know that computers kind of frustrated me in college. I always liked them, but they were especially glitchy back then. It's hard to love something that eats your 10-page term paper the night before it's due. Fortunately, I had friends that didn't mind walking me through some commands and showing me how to fix many of my own problems. What I did love in college was going to the computer, this new thing called the computer lab, and surfing this thing called the internet that everyone was raving about. There weren't internet connections in dorm rooms back then, or even most classrooms. You wanted internet, you walked over to the computer lab during the designated times they were available. The access to any information I wanted, even in those early days, was really what I was after back then. The computer just happened to be the gateway to that. So fast forward a bit, I graduated college with a double major in psychology and biology and started looking for a job. In a strange twist, while looking for work in neuroscience, I was hired to an entry-level position at a help desk of a telephone marketing company. And much to my surprise, those experiences I had during college gave me enough of a leg up that they started moving me up the ranks. After a few years of training and a few amazing bosses that mentored me in so many different network, computer, and phone technologies, I had progressed as far as I was going to go, and I was looking for a new challenge. In 2001, I was brought in to manage, maintain, and expand many of the same systems I had worked at the corporate level for a small private school in Chester Springs. Best part being, I was going to work at a place that shared my enthusiastic passion for learning. It was like I had found heaven, except they called it Montgomery School. Now, with that little Mr. Hamilton history lesson out of the way, let's move on to the subject of the internet. I was obviously far from the only person to be intoxicated with the power of the internet. The map above starts when I was a freshman in high school and shows every major underseas cable run from then until the ones that are planned for next year. And I show this to you in order to highlight just how quickly the internet, which was invented in the United States, became important to the entire world. But in order to truly appreciate what's going on in this image, you have to ask yourself a few obvious questions. Anyone know what those might be? We're up to 1998, huh? No? Okay. What does an underseas cable even look like, and how do you run one? Are we up to 2017 yet? I want to let it finish. There's a lot of them, huh? All right. This is what an underseas cable looks like when you cut it open. Please note that all the silver and gray metal that you see is there to protect the cable and keep it from falling apart in the ocean. Those little slivers at the end of blue, green, and yellow are the fiber optic cable that actually carry the packets of data across the oceans of planet Earth. Even more impressive than that is how long they need to be to cross an ocean. That is a guy standing on a spool of underseas cable, ready to go out on a ship. These cables in their modern day form are capable of carrying terabits worth of information at the speed of light. But this isn't really the internet. It's just what carries internet communications across the oceans. Which brings me to the great open secret about the internet. You ready for this, Mr. Fenner? The internet is simply a shared connection of all the computers on it. When you use, say, Snapchat, what you are really doing is using your internet connection to get to Snapchat, the company, which has computers set up that deliver your messages to you when you connect to their computers, also known as servers. We live in an age where anyone with a modest amount of computer knowledge could set up a server and put out information available anywhere in the world at nearly the speed of light. These can be text, picture, sound, video, VR. So, if the internet is just a collection of computers and connections to computers, why is it so powerful? Allow me to bring in a young Steve Jobs to explain the power of a computer.
I think one of the things that really separates us from the high primates is that we're tool builders. And I read a study that measured the efficiency of locomotion for various species on the planet. The condor used the least energy to move a kilometer. And humans came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. It was not too proud of a showing for the crown of creation. So that didn't look so good, but then somebody at Scientific American had the insight to test the efficiency of locomotion for a man on a bicycle. And a man on a bicycle, or a human on a bicycle, blew the condor away, completely off the top of the charts. And that's what a computer is to me. What a computer is to me is, it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with. And it's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds.
That was over 30 years ago. We don't have bicycles anymore. By his own analogy, we carry F1 race cars, and they fit in our pocket. Did I mention you can time travel on the internet? This is a 5 megabyte hard drive being loaded onto a plane in 1956. It would take 12,800 of those to equal what came in my smartphone. I did the math. We have thousands upon thousands of times more history available through our phones than was in that library I went to as a kid. And some of my favorite history is in quotes. When wireless is perfectly applied, the whole Earth will be converted into a huge brain, which in fact it is, all things being particles of a real and rhythmic whole. We shall be able to communicate with one another instantly, irrespective of distance. Not only this, but through television and telephony, we shall see and hear one another as perfectly as though we were face to face, despite intervening distances of thousands of miles. And the instruments through which we will be able to do this will fit in a vest pocket. Nikola Tesla, 1926. Pretty amazing that Tesla said that in 1926. When I was growing up, this guy was considered by most of my teachers to be the highest level of crazy. Even though he invented the concept of AC current, and he was considered crazy because of statements like this. Now, whenever I hear someone is crazy or odd, I find myself searching for clues to see if maybe they are just smarter than everyone else. Maybe there are things I could learn from them. Disclaimer, though, there are some downright crazy people in the world, so don't get too close until you're sure. All right. If there's one thing my psychology background taught me, it's that our minds are scary, easy to manipulate. But it's also what makes them amazing. Context changes the way our minds perceive things. Two completely opposite motions in the same image. The really interesting part is a computer cannot do what you are doing right now, going back and forth between two different perceptions of the animation in front of you. The math behind a computer will tell it the dancer is spinning clockwise or counterclockwise. But a human mind is far more suited to actually understand how it can be both. Computers are very rigid in their thinking. We are more flexible. I have yet to see a computer program that can take in context anywhere close to what our minds can. In other words, Whatever it is you're taking in through your five senses, in this case sight, can instantly change meaning for us based on what's around it, which is also where the real power of these tools come into play. Case in point, I can change the Rocky III promo from hardcore boxing movie to a progressive romantic comedy just by adding a hand. Yeah, you like that one, huh? Or, I could tell you that most people have a misconception about how close the moon is to the Earth, because textbooks tend to focus on the size relationship when limited to a small picture on a page. And I can try and explain how large that misconception is, or simply show you this 3-second animation. This technology can also be used to sell people whatever they want to hear. Just a few months ago, the Arizona Republic was covering a protest. But different people tend to buy different things, so on the exact same day in 2 different zip codes, through the magic of technology, we can give people exactly what they want to hear. And the only reason I can show this to you is because of the shift in the way information moves caused by the internet. When mass communication was limited to going through central points, like, say, a library, post office, or newspaper publisher, the way information moved was more like the graphic on the left, centralized. When the internet first appeared, it created a shift to the decentralized model in the middle. And that increasingly decentralized model continues to decentralize, which is leading us to the distributed model on the right. I know that was a lot of big words. 20 years ago, I would have had to drive between those 2 different zip codes to see those 2 different headlines. The mega corporations that own almost all of our media have known how easy it is to lie without saying a word for a long time. The burger you buy at McDonald's isn't the same one as in the commercial, just like the model you see in real life isn't nearly as perfect as their magazine cover shot would lead you to believe. We generally don't see a commercial or magazine cover and instantly call it a lie because we're all human, and like I said before, our human psychology gives us certain tendencies. However, I don't want to focus on all the ways mankind's new superpowers of the mind can be used for evil. I want to focus on the miracles it can create. But first, I need to take a brief interlude onto the subject of Caritas. The Wikipedia entry for Caritas gave me the definition of Caritas from St. Thomas Aquinas, who wrote his works in Latin and was maybe the greatest philosopher ever to inhabit the Catholic Church. Thomas Aquinas understood Caritas as the friendship of man for God, which unites us to God. He holds it as the most excellent of virtues. Further, Aquinas holds that the habit of Caritas extends not only to the love of God, but also to the love of our neighbor. As I researched further, reading everything Aquinas had to say on the subject, it reminded me of something else the internet once taught me. At the top of this graphic is you. You have 2 parents. Each of your parents had 2 parents, giving you 4 grandparents. Each of your grandparents had anybody? Yeah, 2 parents, yeah, you can say 2 parents, yes, giving you 8 great-grandparents. And so on. If we assume this process happens every 30 years, what we call a generation, and take this pattern back to just the year 1400 AD, we get this. You should have 1,073,741,824 great, you get it. But world population at that time was around 450 million. So please feel free to give your long-lost brothers and sisters a big hug today, and welcome to them to the family. Oops. For me, nothing has highlighted this connection we have to each other like the internet. So, case in point. Meet Sapphire. Her mother, father, and brother were all victims of arson. She was the only one in her family to survive the fire. And as you can tell, she was badly burned. Her first Christmas without her family, she told her uncle that all she wanted was to fill up that little metal Christmas tree with cards. He tried to explain to her that they didn't know enough people, it might not happen, and he couldn't bring himself to. So he put out a cry for help on the internet. And the people that heard that cry and passed it along didn't think filling that little tree up with cards was quite good enough. I did a search to find an example of a child receiving a 3D printed prosthetic and was pleasantly shocked to see how many thousands of these videos there are.
Here's your next frozen arm. So do you want to try it on? Yeah?
Students at Siena College presented Carissa Mitchell with a Frozen-themed prosthetic arm. A group of students spent 30 hours perfectly crafting the prosthetic using a 3D printer to make the 9-year-old's life a little bit easier. With the prosthetic, she'll be able to grasp things, shake hands, and clutch stuffed animals.
It feels like I have a real hand. It's really cool. Snowflakes are carved in it, and then my name is on it with a little crown.
Carissa was born with most of her wrist and right hand missing. It's taken over a year working with her to customize the prosthetic. Not only will Carissa now be able to grasp things with her new Frozen prosthetic, she'll be looking trendy and fashionable at the same time. Be sure to watch Inside Edition.
Prosthetics, or fake limbs, used to be incredibly expensive. And even the ones that didn't work and were just there for the look cost thousands of dollars. And I know for all of you students, this is just the world you live in, but to anyone who saw someone struggle with this type of disability 20 years ago, this is a miracle. At no other time in human history have we had the ability to instantly connect with the human side of people living in the shadow of war. My wife's Anne is deaf, and people that suffer from this disability lack the ability to hear, and were incredibly isolated when phones were all that existed. Today, as Tesla said, they can see and use sign language with one another as though they were in the same room. It has literally created a whole new world for Aunt Sharon and millions of other people. Before this type of video calling became popular, I only heard stories about Aunt Sharon. Now I see her at many family get-togethers, and I'm sure that is in large part to not feeling like they had to send her a written formal invitation anytime they were having a gathering. One last miracle, and this one I found to be shockingly common too. I found a bunch of these stories spread throughout many countries and settled on the story of this girl named Bethlehem. She grew up in Harar, Ethiopia, in what we would consider a very poor community. Bethlehem considered herself lucky to be one of the few students at her school to have a computer at home growing up. She used this computer to teach herself programming. Bethlehem had 7 software patents by the time she was 17. All of them involved bringing more technology services to her community, especially schools. So, my main point to you today is that our ability to share information has had an effect on everything we do. In many ways, it's downright intimidating in today's world. The 1956 gold medal performer wouldn't even make the cut today. How can you ever expect to compete with that? And that's the problem with being able to take in information like this so quickly. You see the jump, but not the years of disciplined diet and training that preceded it. When I told you about Bethlehem, I'm sure there are at least a few of you that were secretly thinking to yourselves, I wish I was that gifted at programming. But would any of you really want to grow up in a poor part of Africa where all you had to play with at home was a very old and slow computer? In effect, the internet can make things look easier than they are, even as it allows you to learn more easily than any other generation in human history. So, how should you be using the internet? I had to think long and hard about this one. Everyone has different interests and motivations. What general rule could I possibly tell you that would be relevant for everyone in this room? So, I looked for a quote from one of my more recent heroes, Aaron Swartz. Einstein's just there to back him up, and because I make it a rule to include an Einstein quote in all my chapels. Aaron was one of the early pioneers of social media, and he was creator of one of my favorite websites. His story is too long for this chapel, although there is a documentary floating around the internet about him entitled The Internet's Own Boy, if you're curious. And that is the rule here. Be curious and use that curiosity and use the internet to fuel that curiosity. It doesn't have to be all the time. I know the internet contains just about every form of entertainment you could possibly ask for, but my plea to you is this. Try taking just an hour or a half hour a week where you were going to watch Netflix, Hulu, or play video games, and instead search for a new internet resource on something that you're passionately curious about. It doesn't have to be computer or programming related. If you're into sports, look into what the best training routines are for your sport and try incorporating some of them into your training. If you're into music, find resources that help you make the music you want to make. You don't have to be a computer person to take advantage of these incredible tools at your fingertips and create miracles. You just need a passion for something. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.